Welcome to the series of Driftawat Tales. Let's begin without any wait. Chapter 1: Death at Midnight. The village of Elderwood had never cared for excitement. It belonged to that gentle breed of English villages where gossip was small, politeness was compulsory, and nothing dramatic ever happened unless it was discussed over tea first. That is why the midnight death of Alden Finch, the village clockmaker, became the most astonishing event Elderwood had seen in 30 years, possibly 40, if one discounted the scandal of Mrs. Penberry's runaway maid. Mr. Finch was a quiet man, unmarried, measured in speech, mechanical in habits, the sort of man people thought very little about until he dawned. Then everybody suddenly remembered that they had always found him rather peculiar. He lived alone above his little clock shop on Bridge Lane, a shop full of wooden timepieces, silver carriage clocks, tarnished pocket watches, and a tall grandfather clock that stood near the back door like a silent guardian. There was talk that Mr. Finch could make any clock in the world speak again, if only given patience and solitude. There was also quieter talk that he liked secrets more than people. On the morning after his death, Constable Henry Blythe stood outside the shop trying his best to look official while keeping the icy wind from sliding down his collar. The doctor had declared it a heart failure, very tidy, very ordinary. But death, no matter how simple, always draws a crowd. Mrs. Mapleton from the sweet shop claimed Mr. Finch had looked perfectly normal the previous afternoon. Mr. Potter from the butcher's swore he had heard a strange chime from the clock tower after midnight. Mrs. Grantley, who sold knitted cardigans, was convinced he had been murdered by foreign agents, though this was widely understood to be unlikely, as she suspected everyone of being a foreign agent, including her postman. The door opened and out stepped Dr. Horace Latham, wiping his spectacles. Natural causes, he announced to the small crowd. Sad, of course, but not unexpected. Mr. Finch wasn't a young man. He was only 63, said Mrs. Mapleton indignantly, as though Mr. Finch had let the village down by dying too soon. I have known perfectly healthy men die at 40, said Dr. Latham, and perfectly ridiculous ones live to 90. He glanced meaningfully at Mrs. Grantley. At that moment, a neat motor car drove into Bridge Lane and stopped close to the clock shop. Out stepped a small elderly lady in a pale gray coat, wool gloves, and a traveling hat that had survived several decades with dignity. Her kind blue eyes took in the scene at once. "We Miss Marple," exclaimed Mrs. Mapleton. "Are you visiting Elderwood?" "Yes," Miss Jane Marple said pleasantly. "I am staying with my nephew Raymond and his friend Mrs. Ellsworth for a few days. We arrived late last night. I had no idea the village had suffered a loss already." "Poor Mr. Finch is dead," said Mrs. Mapleton, with the solemn air of someone delivering dramatic news. "How very sad," Miss Marple said. "Was he ill?" "No," Mrs. Mapleton replied importantly. "He just died. Most people do." Miss Marple gave a small smile. She made her way closer to the door. Constable Blythe straightened. "Shop is closed today, Miss. Official matter, of course," Miss Marple said, gently moving past him to peer inside through the glass. The counter was neat. The clocks on the walls all read different times, as if time itself had stopped caring about order in that room. Nothing seemed out of place, and yet the air in the shop did not feel like a room recently left by an old man who had died quietly. It felt unsettled. "Where was he found?" she asked mildly. "In the workshop," said the constable. "Upstairs at the back, chair by the desk." "Peaceful enough." "Indeed," Miss Marple murmured. "People often look peaceful after great struggle. Death is very obliging that way. Constable Blythe blinked. Are you suggesting? Oh no, she said at once. I simply mean nature tidies its own rooms. One mustn't assume a tidy room has not been used. Before he could think of a reply, another figure appeared inside the shop, a tall man in a tailor-made coat, with the firm expression of someone used to responsibility. He came to the door and nodded in greeting. Good morning, he said to the crowd. I am Mr. Gideon Moore, solicitor to Mr. Finch. Solicitor, repeated Mrs. Mapleton eagerly. Oh, so, there will be a will then. Mr. Moore's lips twitched slightly. Most people have one, madam. But I do not discuss such matters in public. Miss Marple watched him carefully. The man's shoes had traces of white mortar dust, quite out of place in a clockmaker's shop. Interesting. A small boy came running, then breathless. Constable Blythe, the church clock hit stopped, and it stuck at 12 o'clock exactly. 12 o'clock, whispered Mrs. Mapleton. That's when Mr. Finch must have died. Midnight. There was a silence, then a hush full of superstition and the uncomfortable thrill of something unnatural. Mr. Moore cleared his throat impatiently. Coincidence, he said. Clocks stop. Men die. There is no mystery here. But Miss Marple was still watching him. He had spoken sharply, not like a man who wished to calm a crowd, but like a man who wished to end curiosity. And if life had taught Miss Jane Marple anything, it was this. When a person is too eager to end curiosity, it is because they are afraid of what curiosity may discover. She folded her gloved hands calmly. Elderwood, she decided, was not so quiet after all. She had come for a peaceful holiday of knitting and letters, and instead, she had found a puzzle. Mr. Finch had died exactly at midnight. The church clock had stopped at the same moment, and someone in Elderwood, someone still watching, did not want questions asked. Chapter 2. Questions in Elderwood. The next morning dawned pale and brittle, the sky dusted with a thin frost, as though winter had forgotten to leave Elderwood entirely. Miss Marple sat at the breakfast table in Mrs. Ellsworth's ivy-covered cottage, stirring her tea with absent thought. While others talked, Miss Marple listened first with her ears, then with her mind. Quite a fuss about it, said Mrs. Ellsworth, a graceful widow in her 50s, with the quiet air of a woman who preferred good manners to good conversation. Poor Mr. Finch, and such a tidy man too. One does not expect tidy men to die suddenly. I always thought he was odd, said Raymond, Miss Marple's nephew, between bites of toast. Never spoke, unless he had to. Refused dinner invitations. Kept to himself. Men who live alone often do, Miss Marple said mildly. But I always find it interesting when a man avoids company. Either he dislikes people or he has something to hide. Hide. Raymond laughed. A clockmaker. What could he possibly hide? Miss Marple did not answer immediately. She was watching a small smear of oil on the corner of Raymond's sleeve where he leaned close to the newspaper. Clock oil, she thought suddenly. A very particular smell. Someone had adjusted a clock recently. Someone not Mr. Finch. Was Mr. Finch wealthy? She asked, as though it were just a passing curiosity. Mrs. Ellsworth paused. Wealth? Oh no, I shouldn't think so. He lived quite simply. Yes, Miss Marple said. But simplicity is often an admirable disguise. After breakfast, she walked into the village. The church stood in the middle, its tall stone tower rising like a silent sentinel. Mrs. Ellsworth had said Sunday services drew the entire village, and that would be tomorrow. For now the churchyard was empty, perfectly so. Too empty. She stopped. The frost on the grass showed footprints, 2 sets, fresh, leading from the lych gate to the side entrance of the church. Most curious at this hour, Miss Marple followed. Inside, the church was shadowed and still. A fire had not yet been lit, and the morning air clung to the pews like cold smoke. But Miss Marple had not come alone. "Who's there?" called a voice suddenly. From behind the rude screen stepped Reverend Samuel Harper, a thin man with a kindly, earnest face and a nervous smile that seemed to apologize for existing. "Oh, Miss Marple," he said, visibly relieved. "Goodness gracious, I thought, well, never mind. Forgive me, I'm still thinking about Mr. Finch, I suppose." "You knew him well?" Miss Marple asked gently. "Not well," Reverend Harper admitted. "He came to services now and then. Donated to the church repairs 3 years ago. Quiet man. When one spoke to him, he listened carefully but answered little." "Listening is a rare talent," Miss Marple said. "Did you hear the church clock stopped at midnight?" "Yes," Harper said, a shadow passing over his face. "A strange thing. Mr. Finch maintained that clock since boyhood. Never once did it fail under his care." "Someone must wind it now," Miss Marple said. Harper hesitated. "Yes, someone must." But he did not say who. "Interesting." She found Constable Blythe outside the Hare and Barrel, a respectable public house with a reputation for mild gossip and strong ale. He was writing in a notebook when she approached. "Good morning," she said pleasantly. "Have you learned anything new about Mr. Finch?" Constable Blythe shifted uncomfortably. "Medical death, Miss Marple. Sudden heart stoppage. Nothing more to learn." "Death is quite final," Miss Marple agreed, "but explanations rarely are. May I ask, was anything missing from his shop?" He glanced up sharply. "Who said something was missing?" "People often remove things when death is inconvenient," she said lightly, "or add them if they wish to change a story." Blythe flushed. "One small item is unaccounted for." "Oh, Mr. Finch's pocket watch," Blythe admitted. "Silver case, engraved initials. He kept it on him always. But it wasn't found in the shop or in his room." "And yet his room was tidy," said Miss Marple softly, "down to the slippers placed side by side. You noticed that?" "Death speaks in details," she replied. Later, she stepped into Potter's Butcher's. Mr. Potter, a well-fed, red-cheeked man with strong opinions, was trimming bacon behind the counter. "Ah, Mrs. Marple, miss," she corrected gently. "Ah, yes, Miss Marple, what can I do for you?" "Sausages, finest in the county." "No, thank you," said Miss Marple, "something quite different." "I hear you saw Mr. Finch the day before his passing." "Oh, yes," Mr. Potter nodded. "Came in for chops. Very particular about his meat. He was. Said he needed strength, had important work to do." "Work?" "That's what he said. Important work." I joked. "Running late, Mr. Finch. On account of the clocks, you see." But he didn't laugh. Said something queer. Said time keeps secrets better than people do. Odd thing to say. "Yes," Miss Marple said. "Most odd." She stopped next at Mapleton's sweet shop, where Mrs. Mapleton already had her elbows on the counter ready for news. "Miss Marple," she said eagerly, "have you heard the latest? Mr. Finch had a visitor the night he died." "Oh," Miss Marple asked mildly. "Who?" "No one knows. But someone was seen leaving his shop after midnight." "By whom?" Mrs. Mapleton leaned forward dramatically. "Young Thomas Hill, the milk boy. He was cycling past on his early rounds." "I see," said Miss Marple. "And where might I find Thomas?" Thomas Hill was found behind Henderson Farm, trying to mend a bicycle chain and losing the battle. Miss Marple approached. "You saw someone leave Mr. Finch's shop on the night of his death," she said gently. Thomas froze. I didn't say murder. I never said murder." "No," she replied, "but you said someone was there." Thomas swallowed. "Tall, dark coat, moved quick, didn't see his face. But he locked the door behind him. Who locks a dead man's door?" Miss Marple straightened slowly. "Someone," she said, "who didn't want to be followed." As she walked back to Bridge Lane, a cold wind moved. Under eaves, the quiet little death of Alden Finch had begun to look less accidental. He had spoken of secrets. He had hinted at work unfinished. And someone had made sure he never finished it. Miss Marple paused outside the clock shop. Above, on the church tower, the dead clock showed 12 o'clock forever. "People lie," Miss Marple murmured, "but time tells the truth." Chapter 3. The Man from London. The next day dawned gray and unsettled, with a low wind that prowled restlessly across Elderwood, as though carrying a warning no one wished to hear. Inside the small sitting room of Mrs. Ellsworth's cottage, Miss Marple sat knitting, her needles gliding quietly. To anyone watching, she looked perfectly absorbed in her work, yet, behind those mild eyes, thoughts moved with precision. There were puzzle pieces now. A clockmaker dead at midnight. A missing watch. A church clock stopped. An unknown visitor. A solicitor too eager to close the matter. And puzzles, Miss Marple believed, behaved very much like weeds. Given a little attention, they showed their true roots. A brisk knock came at the door. Mrs. Ellsworth admitted Inspector Graves of Marlborough Division, a serious man with a neat mustache and a suspicion of amateurs. He had arrived from the county headquarters earlier that morning and already carried an air of weary authority. "Good morning," he said as he entered. "I understand Miss Marple has taken an interest." Miss Marple smiled sweetly. "I find interest is often taken for granted until it becomes an inconvenience." Inspector Graves gave her a long look. "Constable Blythe tells me you believe something is amiss in the Finch affair." "Oh no," Miss Marple said kindly. "I never said so. I only asked why a tidy man died with his slippers placed side by side, yet with his back door unbolted." The inspector blinked. "What has that to do with anything?" "Men who live alone lock their doors," Miss Marple replied. "They do not leave them open in the dead of night unless, of course, they are expecting someone." The inspector frowned. "Your point?" "My point," Miss Marple said, knitting serenely, "is that Mr. Finch was not surprised to see whoever came." Inspector Graves sat down slowly. He was thoughtful now, though trying not to show it. "Very well, let's speak plainly. Do you believe Alden Finch was murdered?" "I believe Mr. Finch died," Miss Marple said, "but I do not think he died alone." Before the inspector could respond, another knock came, sharp, purposeful. Mrs. Ellsworth opened the door and stepped back in surprise. "Oh, Mr. Moore." Gideon Moore, solicitor to Mr. Finch, entered with the stiff courtesy of a man who disapproved of being kept waiting, especially by people he considered unimportant. "I was told," he said, nodding curtly at Inspector Graves, "that you had questions for me regarding Mr. Finch's records." "We'll come to that," Graves said. "Sit down." "I prefer to stand," Moore said. Miss Marple watched him carefully. His shoes were polished today, no trace of mortar dust as before, but there was a faint scratch on his left glove. "Interesting." "Mr. Moore," she said in a mild tone, You were Mr. Finch's legal representative. Yes, and his friend, she asked. He hesitated. I was professionally acquainted with him. Yes, Miss Marple nodded. And what, if I may ask, was so secret about Mr. Finch's affairs that you have refused to discuss them? Moore stiffened. Miss Marple, the personal business of my clients is not fodder for village gossip. But the death of a man is everyone's business, Miss Marple said gently, especially when someone locked his shop after he died. Inspector Graves turned sharply. Locked? What do you mean locked? Constable Blythe told her, Moore said irritably. The milk boy saw someone leave Finch's shop after midnight. That's not been verified, Graves said. But it will be, Miss Marple murmured. Thomas Hill has no reason to lie. Moore turned on her. With respect, Miss Marple, I must insist you stop encouraging sensationalism. Mr. Finch died of natural causes. The sooner the matter is closed, the better. Miss Marple laid down her knitting. One wonders why you're in such a hurry, Mr. Moore. Closing a man's affairs is tidy. I agree, but tidiness is rarely urgent. Unless, of course, one fears what might be found. Moore's jaw clenched. Good day. He left abruptly. Inspector Graves stared at Miss Marple. You enjoy provoking people. I enjoy honesty, she said. And people rarely reveal themselves willingly. One must nudge. As Inspector Graves prepared to leave, Miss Marple asked, Have you spoken with the vicar? The vicar? Graves frowned. Why would I? Because Mr. Finch was a man who kept his own counsel, Miss Marple said. A man like that confides only when troubled. And clergymen, inspector clergymen, often hear more than doctors or lawyers. Miss Marple walked to the church once more. A solitary figure knelt by the altar, Rail Beatrice Miller, the church organist, a modest young woman with a quiet nature and a habit of watching life from a gentle distance. She rose when she saw Miss Marple brushing dust from her skirt. Good morning, Miss Marple. You are close to Mr. Finch, Miss Marple said gently. I saw you pass his shop twice a day. Beatrice blushed. He repaired the chapel clock for me once. We spoke occasionally. Yes, Miss Marple said. You admired him. Beatrice looked startled, then nodded. He was different. He listened. Most people don't. They talk. And did he speak to you? Of his worries. Beatrice hesitated. Once, only once. He said if truth has a master, then time is his servant. I didn't know what he meant. Oh, I think you did, Miss Marple said kindly. You just don't want to. Beatrice's hands trembled. He was afraid, Miss Marple. Something was weighing on him. He said he wanted to tell someone, but he didn't trust anyone in Elderwood. Did he tell you why? Beatrice swallowed. He said someone was watching him. Miss Marple walked back to Bridge Lane, deep in thought. Something had begun long before Mr. Finch died. Something he had discovered. At the end of the street, she paused. A new car had arrived in Elderwood, sleek black Wolseley. A stranger stood beside it, a man in a neat overcoat and scarf, lighting a cigarette. He had the look of a man who did not belong in villages. Excuse me, Miss Marple said pleasantly. Are you visiting Elderwood? The man smiled thinly. You could say that. Have we met before? Miss Marple asked. I doubt it, he said. My name is Mr. Lionel Drake. I'm here on business. What kind of business? Private, he said smoothly. But Miss Marple noticed something change in his expression a flicker, only the moment he glanced at Mr. Finch's clock shop. And that was when Miss Marple knew. Lionel Drake had come to Elderwood because of Alden Finch. Chapter 4. The shop with too many clocks. Mr. Lionel Drake did not remain a mystery for long. Villages are hostile to secrets. Within an hour, everyone in Elderwood knew that a business gentleman from London had come and was staying at the Kingfisher Inn. Opinions were already forming about him, none of them flattering. Miss Marple, however, did not rely on village opinion. She preferred facts, especially the facts people tried to hide. And so, the next morning, she paid a quiet visit to Bridge Lane. Mr. Finch's clockshop had been sealed after his death, but the hastily printed notice on the door, "temporarily closed," did not deter Miss Marple. She had already observed something the police had not. The side workshop door lock was scratched, as though someone uncertain had recently opened it. She walked around the back of the shop, where a narrow passage led to a rarely used service door. It was hardly noticeable unless one was searching for it. She knocked gently. The door opened a crack, and Constable Blythe peered out nervously. "Miss Marple, you shouldn't be here." "Oh, but I am here," she said mildly. "And I should like to step inside, if you don't mind." Inspector Graves said. "Yes, I know what Inspector Graves said," Miss Marple replied kindly. "But as you and I both know, rules are sometimes made expressly to keep the wrong people out and the right people in." Constable Blythe hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, the clock shop was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but a watchful one. The air smelled faintly of clock oil, metal polish, and something almost medicinal. Miss Marple immediately noticed three things. The workbench drawers had been opened and hastily closed again. A small rug near the counter had been moved slightly off-center. And most strangely, every single clock had been stopped. "Did you do this?" she asked softly. Blythe shook his head. "No, miss. They were like this when we came in." "Clocks are creatures of habit," said Miss Marple thoughtfully. "When a clockmaker stops every clock, he is sending a message." She began moving about the room, not touching anything, simply looking. People, she often said, saw much but noticed little. Her eyes fell on a glass display case. Inside were several smaller items: pocket watches, miniature timepieces, and metal keys. Most of the items sat in neat rows, but one space was empty, leaving a faint outline in the dust. "That," said Blythe, "is where the missing pocket watch was kept. The police think a thief got in." "Thieves," said Miss Marple, examining the gap, "are rarely so tidy, and thieves do not stop clocks." Blythe watched helplessly as she crossed to the back of the shop. A door opened to a small, narrow staircase leading to the workroom above. The room was as simple as Mr. Finch himself: one bed, one desk, one lamp, one chair. Yet even here, signs of disturbance lingered. The drawer of the desk was not fully shut, and there was a crease in the bedspread, as if someone had placed a small box there and taken it away. Miss Marple opened the desk, not rifling through it, but studying it. Inside were tools, ink bottles, unused envelopes, sealing wax, and a folded slip of paper. "What's that?" asked Blythe. "A receipt," Miss Marple said, "for 5 brass clock screws from Caldwell's Mechanics, London. Purchased just 2 weeks ago." Mr. Finch had no use for brass screws. Blythe frowned. "He always used tempered steel." "Yes," said Miss Marple, "which makes this receipt very out of place." She lowered herself into the work chair, smoothing her gloves. "Constable Blythe, if a man is frightened, what does he do?" "Locks his doors," Blythe said. "And if a frightened man cannot trust anyone," Miss Marple continued, "he hides something in plain sight." She glanced toward the large grandfather clock in the corner. It stood tall and dark, its long face blank in the half-light, and unlike every clock in the rest of the shop, this one had not been stopped. Its pendulum still swung gently, like the slow beat of a hidden heart. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Mr. Finch," she said softly, "what did you hide?" She reached for the clock, and a sound came from outside. Footsteps, then a shadow passed the window. Someone was watching them. Someone who did not want that clock opened. Chapter 5. The Man Watching. Miss Marple's hand paused on the edge of the grandfather clock as the faint crunch of footsteps outside faded. Constable Blythe hurried to the window and peered out, but whoever had been there had already vanished into the village lane. "No one," he said, confused. "Or they moved fast." "Yes," Miss Marple murmured, "because they had a very good reason to leave before we stepped outside. To avoid being seen." "No," said Miss Marple, "to avoid being recognized." She stepped away from the window and looked once more at the tall clock. "I believe you should guard the door, Constable. It would be most unfortunate if we were interrupted again." He nodded, now serious, and went to stand at the back entrance. Miss Marple turned her attention to the clock. It was beautifully crafted, clearly old, with carved oak columns and a glass front protecting the pendulum and weights. Yet despite its age, the screws on its back panel were new. Brass screws, from Caldwell's Mechanics, London. Miss Marple's eyes softened. "Mr. Finch, you clever man. You wanted someone to find this clock, but only someone who would notice what did not belong." She opened the back panel. Inside, instead of clean clockwork, there was a small hidden compartment. And inside that compartment, "Goodness," whispered Miss Marple, "not money, not jewels, not secrets written on paper, but 5 silver keys, each engraved with a tiny number, along with a folded scrap of paper held beneath them." Constable Blythe returned from his post. "Keys? What on earth?" Miss Marple unfolded the tiny paper, written in neat, careful handwriting. "If something happens to me, trust no one from Elderwood. Not the law, not the church, not the bank. The truth is locked in time." A.F. Blythe stared. He thought someone meant to harm him. "Yes," Miss Marple said softly, "and he was not wrong." That afternoon, Miss Marple walked through Elderwood in thought. The keys rattled faintly in her handbag. 5 keys, 5 locks, 5 secrets. The question was, what did they open? She passed the tea shop where Mrs. Mapleton was telling 3 eager women that the stranger from London was, without a doubt, a jewel thief in hiding. She passed the green where schoolchildren played under the watchful eye of Mrs. Pevensey, who believed discipline could be achieved through glares. She passed the Kingfisher Inn, then she stopped. Lionel Drake's car was still parked outside. So was Lionel Drake. He was watching her. Their eyes met briefly. His expression did not change, but his hand stilled on the lighter he was about to flick. Miss Marple continued walking, but her mind sharpened. Men from London did not come to small villages without purpose, and those who claimed their purpose was private often lied. She returned to the church. Reverend Harper was inside again, alone, adjusting him books. "A cold day, Miss Marple," he said quietly. "Yet you walk." "Walking clears the mind," she replied, "especially when one has questions." Harper hesitated, then sighed. "You've heard, then, that someone visited Mr. Finch before his death?" "Yes," Miss Marple said gently. "And I believe Mr. Finch came here often, in the last weeks of his life." "He did," Harper admitted. "He sought reassurance. Then he looked at her earnestly. Miss Marple, Mr. Finch was afraid. But not in the way you might think. He wasn't afraid of death. No, Miss Marple said. He was afraid of murder. Harper's face paled. Tell me, she said softly. Did he ever mention Lionel Drake? Harper hesitated. Then he nodded once. He said, if he finds it, I am finished. Finds what? Miss Marple asked. But Reverend Harper shook his head. He never said. Miss Marple walked back along the frosted path outside the church, mind worry. Something Lionel Drake was searching for. Something so valuable Mr. Finch hid it behind clock screws. Something now tied to 5 silver keys. As she passed a stone bench near the yew tree, she noticed something white tucked between the stones. A small envelope on the front. For Miss Marple, she opened it. Inside was a single card, no greeting, no name, only 4 words. Stop asking about time. No signature. But the message was clear. She was no longer merely observing. She was being warned, which meant someone in Elderwood was watching her every step, and they were afraid of what she might discover. Chapter 6. Keys and Conversations. The envelope had been placed so deliberately that Miss Marple could not help admiring its neatness of purpose. Someone had gone to the trouble not only to watch her but to do so without leaving any obvious trace. That required planning, and planning required fear. Fear of what she might uncover. She slipped the threatening note back into her handbag and continued slowly through Elderwood, pausing now and then as though she were simply enjoying the cold afternoon. But her thoughts were sharp and deliberate. Her next call was the Kingfisher and the inn, run by Mrs. Edith Bramley, was the heart of passing gossip and temporary lodgers. She found Mrs. Bramley behind the counter, polishing glasses in that pointed way villagers did when they wished to look busy but were dying to talk. Good afternoon, Miss Marple said kindly. Miss Marple, Mrs. Bramley brightened. Tea, or something stronger. Tea would be lovely, she smiled. Tell me, how long is Mr. Lionel Drake staying with you? Mrs. Bramley nearly dropped a glass. Oh, not long, I should think. London businessmen never stay long. Too restless, move too fast. Yes, said Miss Marple. And what business brings him to Elderwood? Mrs. Bramley sniffed. He says something to do with property, but if you ask me, he spends more time watching people than buying land. A curious hobby, Miss Marple said gently. Oh, he's not the only visitor lately, Mrs. Bramley added, lowering her voice. Another lodger too arrived yesterday, says he's writing a book. Doesn't look like a writer to me. No, Miss Marple prompted. He carries no notebooks, Mrs. Bramley whispered, and his hands are scratched, like someone who digs in dirt. May I meet him? Miss Marple asked. Mrs. Bramley led her quietly to the parlor. A man sat alone by the fire, his back half turned. He had a worn coat and watchful posture, calm, but not relaxed. Miss Marple, Mrs. Bramley announced, this is Mr. Adrian Blackwood, visiting author. The man turned, nodding politely. A pleasure. Miss Marple sat opposite him. What brings you to Elderwood, Mr. Blackwood? I needed a quiet place to work, he said. Writers thrive on silence. Yes, said Miss Marple. Though silence is rarely natural, it often hides what someone wants unheard. His eyes flicked toward her. You're unusually perceptive, Miss Marple. I knit a great deal, she said politely. Knitting teaches one to notice patterns. His gaze lingered, not hostile, but assessing. I hear this village has had recent excitement. Death is never excitement, said Miss Marple. Only tragedy and then silence. And silence, Mr. Blackwood, is never the end of a story. He smiled faintly, but did not respond. Something about him was guarded, but not malicious. If he was hiding something, it was not guilt, it was purpose. Did you know Mr. Finch? She asked. He hesitated. No, a lie. Not loudly spoken, but detectable in the stillness of his voice. She stood. Thank you for the conversation, and good luck with your writing. As she reached the door, he said suddenly, Be careful, Miss Marple. She turned. Am I in danger, Mr. Blackwood? His expression did not change. Anyone who asks questions in Elderwood is. Outside the inn, snow clouds began gathering overhead, turning the afternoon dim. Miss Marple drew out the 5 keys from her handbag. 5 keys and 5 potential doors. But which doors? The clockmaker had hidden them for a reason. Keys belonged to Lockslocks 2 secrets. Time keeps secrets better than people do, Mr. Finch had said. But keys unlock time. Miss Marple next visited Finch's apprentice, Peter Carter, who ran a small stall repairing watches at the market square. Peter was only 19, but he had an intelligent face, sharpened by worry. Peter, she said gently, did Mr. Finch seem troubled lately? Peter stopped filing a gear. He wasn't sleeping. He made mistakes. He triple-locked the workshop. He glanced around and lowered his voice. He asked me not to trust Mr. Moore, the solicitor. Peter nodded. He said, Lawyers tidy up after death, but only a few tidy up before it. I didn't understand. Oh, Miss Marple said softly. I believe I do. She placed one of the keys in front of him. Do you recognize this? Peter studied it. That's one of the vault keys. Vault. He hesitated. Mr. Finch kept old clock parts and rare mechanisms in a storage vault under the church, but only he ever went inside. He said some things were safer locked away. And where is this vault? Miss Marple asked. Peter looked afraid to answer. Please, she said gently. It may already be too late for fear. He exhaled slowly. At the base of the church tower, he whispered. There's a door behind the organ. Nobody ever sees it. Nobody even knows it's there. And the key? Miss Marple asked. Peter swallowed. You already have it, he said. Chapter 7. The Vault Beneath the Church. Snow began to fall over Elderwood, just after dusk, a thin, quiet drift that softened rooftops and blurred footprints. Miss Marple, far from deterred by cold, wrapped her shawl tightly and made her way toward the church. She preferred to investigate while others slept. Night, she often said, was when secrets forgot to hide. The church was dark, save for a lonely lantern hanging near the lich gate. Inside, she found Reverend Harper, closing his Bible for the night. Miss Marple, he said, surprised. Out at this hour, I find the night air refreshing, she said politely. But I've come on another matter, one that touches your church. He hesitated. Yes. I need access to the base of your tower, she said calmly, behind the organ. There is a door there. Harper went very still. I see, he said slowly. Peter told you. Yes. Miss Marple met his eyes. Mr. Finch trusted very few people. You were one of them. Will you help me now? Harper hesitated, then nodded. He took a lantern and led her down a narrow passage to the rear of the organ chamber, where a tall wooden instrument rose like a slumbering giant. Behind it, nearly hidden in shadow, was an old iron door set into the wall, small, square, and sturdy, with a circular lock. This door, Harper said quietly. Hasn't been opened in years. Not by you, Miss Marple said, but by someone. She knelt and examined the lock. There, barely visible in the dust, were fresh scratches. Someone had tried one key or many. She took one of Mr. Finch's silver keys from her bag. It had a small numeral engraved on it. 2. She inserted it. It did not turn. She tried another. Key 4. Click. The lock released. Harper looked unnerved. Miss Marple, you certain? She opened the door. A cold breath of underground air curled out. Steps descended into a stone vault. Miss Marple lifted the lantern and went down. It was a small chamber, the air still and ancient. On one side stood rows of wooden crates marked clock parts and repair stock. On the other side metal boxes secured with locks she did not yet possess keys for, and at the far end of the room, a table. On the table a broken pocket watch, its casing dented, its glass shattered. Mr. Finch's missing watch. Someone brought it here, Miss Marple said quietly. But why leave it? Next to the watch lay something far more peculiar, folded village map. Harper opened it carefully. This is Overlook Finch shop, your cottage. Market Square, every house is numbered. Miss Marple leaned closer. 2 buildings had been circled in pencil. One she recognized, Finch's shop, the other Elderwood Bank. Why, Miss Marple asked softly, would a clockmaker mark a bank on a secret map? Harper looked sick. You think Mr. Finch meant to expose something? No, Miss Marple said. I think Mr. Finch had already discovered something, and someone killed him before he could reveal it. A faint creak came from above. Miss Marple froze. Someone is in the church, she whispered. Harper extinguished the lantern at once. Darkness swallowed them. Soft footsteps moved overhead, slow, cautious, deliberate. The organ pipes murmured as though touched by something passing. The steps moved toward. The back end stopped over the vault entrance. Miss Marple held her breath. A hand tried the vault door, found it open. Then gently, oh, so gently, the door closed again. The person did not come down. Instead, a faint click of a lock. Whoever was outside had locked them in. Harper tensed. We're trapped. Calm yourself, Miss Marple whispered. Panic only comforts murderers. She listened. The footsteps retreated. The church door opened and closed. Silence. They waited another minute before relighting the lantern. They know we were here, Harper said quietly. Yes, Miss Marple said, which means we are not the only ones looking for Mr. Finch's secret. Harper glanced at the broken pocket watch. What now? We take what Mr. Finch left for us, Miss Marple said, gathering the map and the watch. And we do what frightened men never do. What is that? We ask better questions. As they left the church, Miss Marple paused under the ancient yew tree. Snow fell silently around them. We have enemies we cannot see, Harper said nervously. Yes, Miss Marple replied in her soft, reasonable voice. But that only makes them careless. Fear drives mistakes, and someone in Elderwood is very afraid. She looked toward the dim outline of Elderwood Bank in the distance. Tomorrow, she said, I think we shall visit the bank. Chapter 8. A Visit to the Bank. Approximately 500 words. Elderwood Bank sat with the quiet dignity of all small village banks built of stone. Modest in size and determined to appear more important than it was. It was the sort of place where money did not move without polite conversation and 2 signatures. Miss Marple entered precisely at 10 o'clock, accompanied by Reverend Harper. Behind the high desk sat Mr. Cecil Arkwright, bank manager, short, precise, and neat as a ledger. He had the fixed smile of a man who believed deeply in order, silence, and well-pressed suits. "Good morning," he said, adjusting his spectacles, though they needed no adjustment. "How may I be of assistance?" Miss Marple smiled pleasantly. "Good morning, Mr. Arkwright. I wonder if I might ask a small question about the late Mr. Alden Finch." The smile faltered only slightly. "A very regrettable loss, but, as I told Inspector Graves, Mr. Finch banked here as most respectable men do, but conducted no unusual transactions." Miss Marple opened her reticule calmly. "Ah, then perhaps you can explain why Mr. Finch marked Elderwood Bank on a private map." She placed the folded map on the counter just enough for Arkwright to see the bank circled. His composure cracked barely. But it was enough. "I wouldn't know," he said sharply, "and I do not see how that concerns bank affairs." "I believe Mr. Finch was investigating something," Miss Marple said softly, "and I believe he found something here, someone killed him to prevent." Arkwright stiffened. "That is a grave accusation." "Oh, I'm not accusing you," Miss Marple said mildly. "Merely asking why Mr. Finch rented a private storage box here. Box number 12, I believe." If Arkwright had any remaining color in his cheeks, it vanished. "There is no—" Miss Marple withdrew a small silver key from her glove. "Key 2, the vault key." Arkwright swallowed. Reverend Harper leaned closer. "If there is something in that box, Mr. Arkwright, it may explain Mr. Finch's death." The bank manager's struggle was visible: fear against duty, secrecy against exposure. At last he exhaled. "Very well," he muttered. "This way." He led them through a barred gate into the vault corridor, lined with steel lock boxes. The air smelled of metal and stale caution. Box 12 waited at eye level. Arkwright hesitated. "Miss Marple, before I open this, I must warn you. Mr. Finch asked me never to reveal this box to anyone." "How curious," Miss Marple said, "especially since secrets are rarely safe in banks." She gave him the key. His hand shook as he unlocked the box and drew out a sealed brown envelope, heavy, thick. He handed it to Miss Marple. "For Miss Jane Marple," the front read. Harper gasped. He expected you." "Oh no," Miss Marple said quietly. "He feared whoever would come after him and gave the task to someone he believed could still ask questions." She opened the envelope. Inside were 4 documents and a single photograph. Reverend Harper leaned in. Good heavens! The photograph showed 3 people: a young Alden Finch, Gideon Moore, solicitor, and a third man, Lionel Drake. Mr. Finch had known Lionel Drake, and he had hidden that truth before he died. Chapter 9: The Photograph That Lied. For a long moment, no one spoke. The quiet of the vault settled heavily around them as Miss Marple held the old photograph between gloved fingers. 3 young men stood in it, smiling stiffly at the camera as though posing for a future they believed would be entirely their own. Alden Finch, Gideon Moore, Lionel Drake. "Impossible," whispered Reverend Harper. "Mr. Moore said he barely knew Mr. Finch, and Mr. Drake he claimed to be here on business." "People often lie," Miss Marple said quietly, "when the truth binds them together." Mr. Arkwright looked pale. "I don't understand what could connect the 3 of them." Miss Marple reached inside the envelope again and withdrew the 4 folded documents tied with string. She opened the first. It was a partnership agreement between Finch, Moore, And Drake, dated 15 years ago. Harper blinked. Partnership, but Mr. Finch was just a clockmaker. Not always, Miss Marple said. The second document revealed more. A patent application ever submitted bearing the three men's signatures. The invention, a precision timing mechanism capable of bypassing commercial time lock security. Harper frowned. Time lock security. Isn't that used in banks? Miss Marple finished softly. Vault doors. High-value storages. In short, perfect for thieves. She opened the third document, a legal severance notice, signed only by Alden Finch. He had formally cut ties with Moore and Drake. The reason, moral objection. So Finch backed out, Harper murmured. He realized what they intended to do. And that, Miss Marple said, opening the final page, is where the danger began. The last paper was a threat letter, unsigned, with only 4 words. You will regret honesty. Harper stared. He was threatened. Yes, Miss Marple said simply, and he hid everything to protect himself. But someone else was determined to silence him. There was movement behind them, not footsteps, a voice. Well, said Lionel Drake, stepping from the shadows of the vault corridor. How tidy we all are today, unwrapping the past. Reverend Harper recoiled. Mr. Arkwright took a step back. Miss Marple did neither. Mr. Drake, she said calmly, how kind of you to join us. I was wondering whether you would arrive before or after we opened Mr. Finch's box. Lionel Drake smiled thinly. I must admit, you're rather a nuisance, Miss Marple, a dangerous one. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, she said pleasantly. I merely unravel threads. It's people who tie them into knots. Drake ignored her. His eyes swept over the documents. You have no idea what you're playing with. Alden Finch was not a saint. He betrayed his partners. He kept his conscience, Miss Marple corrected. He chose not to be a criminal. Criminal? Drake laughed without humor. Such harsh language for a village knitting enthusiast. Mr. Finch didn't back out because he was righteous. He backed out because he found something more valuable. Something he kept for himself. Something worth killing for. Miss Marple asked softly. Drake stepped forward too close. You think you understand the game, but you don't. This isn't about clocks or secrets. This is about money. And Alden Finch stole from me. Then why kill him now? Miss Marple asked. 15 years late for vengeance. Drake's face hardened, because he stopped himself. Because, Miss Marple finished gently, Mr. Finch finally built the device. And this time he hid it somewhere. Drake's eyes flickered. Found? You're wasting your time, Miss Marple, he said coldly. You're out of your depth. He turned to Levy but paused. I'll give you one warning. Stay out of this, or you'll end up like Finch. He left them in the vault, as the heavy steel door swung shut behind him. Reverend Harper looked shaken. Miss Marple, what now? She folded the documents and returned them carefully to the envelope. Now, she said, eyes thoughtful, we find the truth before Mr. Drake does. Chapter 10. The Hour of Truth. Snow still lay over Elderwood, like a white shroud, when Miss Marple quietly gathered the village in Finch's clockshop at dusk. It was an unusual request, but curiosity, especially village curiosity, is the most obedient of servants. Inspector Graves was there, frowning impatiently. Reverend Harper stood by the door, nervous but resolute. Mr. Arkwright shifted anxiously behind his spectacles. Gideon Moore, cold and tight-lipped, looked ready to deny everything, and Lionel Drake leaned against the far wall, watching Miss Marple with the smug amusement of a man convinced he would win. Peter Carter, Finch's apprentice, stood close to Miss Marple. He did not speak, but his eyes showed hope. Hope that truth might do what grief could not explain. Miss Marple stepped forward. "Thank you for coming. You wonder why we meet in Mr. Finch's shop? It is because this," she gestured to the clocks lining the walls, "is where everything began." She opened Finch's envelope and held up the photograph. This picture shows Alden Finch with Mr. Moore and Mr. Drake 15 years ago. They were partners. They were friends. But something broke them apart. She laid down the documents next. The partnership agreement, the patent draft, the severance notice. They invented a device capable of bypassing time, locks making it possible to open secure vaults. That invention might have made them rich. Harper looked shaken, so Finch walked away. "No," Miss Marple said softly. Finch walked away because he realized what Mr. Drake intended to do with the invention. Not to protect, but to steal. Drake smiled lazily. "Is this the part where you accuse me of robbery? Or murder, perhaps?" "Oh, robbery is far too small a word," Miss Marple said mildly. "You dreamed of control, of opening any vault in England. Or Europe, perhaps." Drake's smile thinned. "But Finch refused to be part of it," she continued. "And so he hid what he built. The final model, the only working device." Moore snapped suddenly. "This is nonsense. Finch had no device." "Oh yes, he did," Miss Marple said. "In fact, he hid it here, in the only place people would never look in plain sight." She moved to the large grandfather clock. All of Elderwood heard this clock still ticking while every other clock in the shop had been stopped. That was deliberate. Her hands moved to the rear panel. She removed the screws. Inside, hidden beneath the pendulum casing, was a small metal instrument, simple, compact. Drake lunged. Inspector Graves seized him. "Enough," Miss Marple continued. "This device is useless without a code." Finch removed that code and hid it. She opened her glove and dropped 5 silver keys onto the counter. 5 keys, she said. 5 locks, 5 clues. She placed the broken pocket watch next to them, and the first clue was the time of his death. Midnight. Moore scoffed. "He wasn't murdered, he died of heart failure." "Yes," Miss Marple said quietly. "Mr. Finch died of digitoxin poisoning, a slow-acting cardiac toxin. His teacup still smelled of bitter almond when I visited. He did not suffer a heart attack, he was poisoned." Inspector Graves stared. "Poison." "And the poison," she said, "was not in something he bought, but something he trusted." Her eyes shifted slowly to someone he trusted. She turned, not to Drake, to Gideon Moore. The room froze. Moore's face drained. No, it was Drakey," threatened Finch. "Yes," Miss Marple said. "Drake threatened him. But you killed him. You who stood to lose everything when Finch severed your partnership. You who feared exposure. You who stayed behind in Elderwood while Drake vanished abroad. You killed Finch before he could expose you." Moore's voice cracked. He was going to ruin us and destroy our lives. He wanted only to stop you," Miss Marple said. "But you did not kill him to save yourself. You killed him for money. Drake wanted the device, but you wanted to sell it first." She held up the warning note. "Stop asking about time. That wasn't from Drake," she said. "That was from you. You were panicking. You didn't want the device found because you didn't know where Finch hid it." Moore stared, broken. "I only meant to scare him," he whispered. I didn't mean. Miss Marple shook her head. Men rarely mean for murder. It simply becomes convenient. Inspector Graves stepped forward. Gideon Moore, you are under arrest. As Moore was taken away, Lionel Drake stepped forward. So what now? You turned me in as well. Oh, Miss Marple said sweetly, I expect Scotland Yard will be very interested in your activities, but I suspect you will flee long before they arrive. Drake's smile returned. I might. Yes, Miss Marple said, but you won't get the device. She crushed it beneath her heel. Drake stared. Then he laughed. You win, madam. No, Miss Marple said gently. Goodness wins. I only tidy up afterward. The clocks began ticking again days later. Peace returned to Elderwood, not tidy, but true. And Miss Marple finished her knitting before returning to St. Mary Mead. She had always said time revealed everything, and so it had. I am glad you were here throughout the story. Thanks for watching.